time for a Volatus update. I was just rudely interrupted by my dog barking at absolutely nothing, so let's try this again and see if I can manage to remember what I've said and haven't said yet. What we're looking at here is the new Volatus software organization on GitHub. This is where I'm going to start organizing all of the Volatus development work. Since this is going to span several languages, there's going to be documentation, shared protobuf message definitions. I wanted a more cohesive home for all of this stuff. So some stuff that existed elsewhere, like the Python API, the Python libraries, now lives under this Volatus software organization. It used to live, the Python code used to live inside of the LabVIEW Volatus repository, which of course doesn't make sense because it's not LabVIEW code. So now this repository exists. I haven't done any new updates with the Python yet. I'm waiting till I finish a couple more networking updates, and then I'll get the Python library caught up. One of the things we can notice is the protobuf message definitions now exist in their own repository. Ooh, that's not the link I wanted to go to. And so these can more easily be embedded into other different projects that are going to be different languages, such as the C++ Volatus core. Shares this. Once I pull the top level repositories for the LabVIEW implementation of Volatus into this organization, that will also link to this as a submodule for convenience. I've got a issues repository. This is where I'm going to start collecting issue submissions, and this is what I'm going to link to in the documentation, which is what I've started and the main topic for this update video. So going back to the repositories, we can see there's two here that might look related. There's user.contents. This is what we're going to look at first. This has the actual documentation content, as might be implied by the name. And then there's user guide. This is the top level GitHub Pages repo that pulls in the shared user docs content and provides the top level integration and GitHub page generation for that. As with most of this Volatus project, things are intended to be mixed and matched with internal proprietary functionality. So if you're a company that has some of your own secret sauce, but you want to merge that in with this as the core framework implementation, this is designed with that in mind from the beginning. That's how I've been using this at my current job, and I'm kind of dog fooding the organization here, and as this user docs get finished, you all will learn how to do that as well. But of course, for the documentation, I'm going to introduce that in this video. Then how that gets done with the LabVIEW code or the C++ code will exist as part of their user guides and developer documentation. Developer documentation is where most of that is going to go. That does not exist yet still. It's still going to come in the form of some of these update videos, but that will be just readmes in the respective repositories for the C++ implementation or the Python implementation or the LabVIEW implementation adjacent to the code. But the user docs are intended to be shared with your own internal documentation, and I've finally landed on an implementation and workflow that I like, so it's time to introduce it. So first, looking at this user docs content repository, we can see it's got this make docs YAML file, and then source with a bunch of stuff in there. And actually in this repository, I should get rid of this docs folder. I'll need to remember to do that. So this is all markdown based, which you might have guessed from make docs. Well, actually, maybe not. But make docs is a free and open source tool. I've looked at stuff like Sphinx and Docusaurus and some of the other large documentation site generation tools that exist out there. And they all have a lot of a pretty big hurdle to get the first builds working. There's a lot of configuration, a lot of customization you have to do. So I've been spending most of the time since the last update video trying to find something that matched the level of the workflow I was going for, and I found it with MakeDocs. And then I found a plugin for MakeDocs called MakeDocs Monorepo, which lets you nest MakeDocs under a higher level MakeDocs, so you can combine nested user documentation content into something that combines all of that and generates your documentation pages, which is really nice. So for a quick example of what this is going to look like once it's built and merged, we can see here I've got an example of this. So this is out of date. The banner should be gray now. But regardless, this is using the material from ArcDocs plugin for the styling and the theming. But there's going to be some conceptual overview stuff is what I'm writing first. Introduction to the structure of the configuration. And then as you get into specific tasks like DACMX, there's going to be specific examples of how you configure thermocouple channels, how you configure voltage input channels, current output channels, all of that kind of stuff. You'll have the exact snippets of JSON that you can copy and paste into the vJSON configs, as well as, of course, all of the overview of how the functionality works, what all the configuration options are, basically everything you would need to do to get a Volatus system up and running. So all the content, except for this overview page, lives as part of this user docs content repository. But as I said, this is meant to be merged into some higher level documentation. So for the publicly available Volatus documentation, that actually comes from this user guide repository. We can see that user docs content is pulled in as a submodule for this repository, and this is what is generating the GitHub pages. So if we go into settings, I'll close that tab because it's open already. You can go to pages, and this is configured here. This will link from all the source code repositories, as well as from this Markdown README, as well as this one, once everything is set up and I get the first version of the documentation released. But anytime I upload a new build of the documentation, it updates the contents in docs. This is the actual assets that are hosted by GitHub pages and are displayed when you look at the user guide for the GitHub pages. So this is the same thing I do at work. There is a Volatus user guide repository in our internal GitHub server that is enterprise GitHub, so it has GitHub pages as well. Any kind of hosting setup would work for this. You could just take what's in docs and then just put this into any kind of basic web hosting. These are all static pages. There's a little bit of client-side JSON for some of the expanding and collapsing navigation, for instance. But there's no server-side code that needs to run. So a really basic requirements as far as where this can live, which was one of my main goals for this. Yeah, so this is configured every time I update something to main, it will update the content here. So what does it look like to work with? Well, here is VS Code. Let me open this up on disk as well. So here's where I've got all my Volatus stuff I'm working on. There's the user guide folder. When you do this clone, when you're doing your own documentation builds, you'd be making your own repository, adding user docs content as a submodule, and then setting up the configuration from there. So if we ignore the user docs content and ignore the docs folder, which is the built output, there's not many other files there. There is a picture. There is the overview page. This is what is shown as the home page of the generated top-level documentation, and then it further links into that user guide documentation to provide some guiding first steps. And then it's got its make docs configuration file. So here we can see I'm naming it Volatus user guide. The documentation source comes from source. The site build output folder goes to docs. And this is a requirement of GitHub, actually. You can either have the root of the repository be what is displayed as the GitHub pages, or you can do a nested docs folder. I think you can do more. I think it lets you type in a custom path. I'm not sure. I haven't tried that. Strict, this just means that it won't finish building the site if there are warnings. So if there are things referenced in the navigation links that don't actually have a page, it can't find those resources, it's going to fail. It's not going to give you a partial build that's broken. It'll just abort. There's some theming set up, so how I set the icon and the logo, some extra CSS. So this is all stuff that isn't in the currently deployed build, because this is what I have in work right now. And then there's this mono repo plugin. The main thing with this is it gives this include notation here, which then lets me pull in a nested makedocs configuration. So this is pulling this from this user docs content. So let me go ahead and collapse all the other noise there. And now this is what provides 99% of the content that is going to be in the public documentation. We can see a lot of the same stuff. Volatus user guide, docsdir, sitedir, sticking with strict. The theme, again, and this time this is also pulling in this Volatus CSS. So this is actually where, that's the docs. So this is actually where this lives. Even at the top level one, it is pulling that in from Volatus user guide. Now this name, and you can see there's a couple of things here pulling the logo, the fave icon, the extra CSS. In the overview page, the links into those use that Volatus user guide, and that name comes from the nested makedocs YAML's site name. And then it just lowercases, it changes characters that are incompatible with URLs to hyphens, so it just becomes Volatus user guide, and then anything listed under its source folder is then identifiable by that path. The makedocs tooling converts all those paths correctly. And then here's the big navigation. So if I shrink the terminal, this is where all of the content is going to live. This is all the content that can be very easily pulled into your own documentation, the same way I'm pulling it into this top-level public documentation. Most of this is still very empty. I'm getting started on, I've done basics. I've started the configuration management documentation with examples and pictures and all of that. So I'm just going to basically be working down the list, starting with the overviews and then filling in the detail. Now, working with this, once you have your top level makedocs site configuration, you can then just do something like makedocs serve. I always add in -- live reload, because that'll get it anytime you change a file, save a markdown file that is in the folder it's monitoring, it'll automatically update what you're looking at in the browser. So I can run this, it's going to do a little internal build, and if everything builds successfully, it'll give you a URL, so I can control click this, and it opened up the page in the browser. So now we can see it's got this slightly different styling. I can come into configuration and see the new management page that isn't available in this public version. And we can see there's just a bunch of stuff, examples of how it's done in LabVIEW, because the LabVIEW implementation is what exists and is deployed right now. But over time, this will also show how it works in C++ and some of the other, in Python or anything like that, where GUIs and tooling and configuration get used. Once I am happy with that, you can do make docs build. This updates the content in the docs folder. So now this content has been updated. And if I do a commit and push, make sure we add all the new files from the new stuff I've added for the configuration management documentation. Oh, I have to do user docs content first. So let's do that, because this is a submodule. So I've got to do that separately. Of course, this is my public open documentation. So as part of your site, you shouldn't ever be editing anything inside of this user docs content folder. You should be adding your own pages under your own source folder that you can link to from the top level navigation. So this is start of configuration management docs. And I'm going to refresh this, commit, and push. And this can take a little bit of time, but momentarily, this should update. So we can say the deployment for GitHub Pages was 5 days ago. I refresh. At some point, this should update. Oh, it's pending. So we can see it's doing the internal action now to do the GitHub Pages build. Okay, now it should be available. It's deploying right now. I would have expected this to be done once the pipeline action was done. Hey, now, cool. So now if I shift reload, the new styling, the new content is all in here. So this is just really simple. Again, the pages are just markdown files, so you can, if you need to do things like links that open in a new tab, you could just use a regular HTTP tag, but it's all pretty easy to work with markdown documentation. And the end result, I'm pretty happy with how it looks. You've got some per page navigation on the right, you've got the entire site navigation on the left, and it's all user defined. I can customize names here regardless of what the file names are. It's all just very declarative as far as what the structure will look like, instead of things getting inferred from disparate configuration files, file names, things like that. I kind of get to be in the driver's seat with this tooling, which just simplifies things. Unlike the Volatus software, where I do need the level of configuration, I'm very happy that I landed on this documentation engine that is simple. So this is what I'm working on. This will probably take me a couple of weeks to get through all of this documentation, get it all filled out to the level I'm happy with. Anybody that's looking at this, feel free, if there's gaps or questions, go to the Volatus software repositories, go to the issues, and feel free to submit an issue. There will be a link to here right from the public documentation, so that'll be even easier to get to. But particularly in the documentation, this is what I want to get done ASAP, because if my end users at work are self-serving and they can reference this documentation and don't need to bug me, that leaves me free to continue working on the C++ implementation, which will add a bunch of new capabilities to it, continue to work on some of the features that are still needed on the LabVIEW implementation, and I'll just have more time available for that stuff. So right now, the user guide is pretty high priority for me, so hopefully this helps everybody out a bunch.